This is going to be a long one. But in light of recent events, I'm going to take my time with this one and diverge from my video series real quick. This is my contribution to the conversation. The people are looking for answers. They are frustrated, angry, afraid, distraught, disappointed, sad and confused, but most of all, lost. And after all the individuals that we've lost, all the lives that have been taken, I've remained stuck in that last category, especially as an Asian American speaking out on this topic. But in recent days, I have really been looking into the person and character of Jesus for how to respond to all the hatred and suffering in this world. So to all of my fellow Christians, I implore you to take the time and listen and to really look into the person of Jesus on how he dealt with injustice. He is the founder and perfecter of our faith, and we need to look to him first and follow his example for answers. And if you're not Christian, please stay and listen as well. This is a message for everyone because Jesus' message is for everyone. But no matter how you see this message, I want you to know first that you are valuable to me and to God, no matter where we stand on this issue. I only intend to point you to the answer that I believe in, the person that I believe in. So without further ado, I'm going to try to do my best to get out of the way and have him speak through me to you. Today, I want to leave you with a few panels of thought when it comes to Jesus and justice. The first question that comes to mind for me is why? Why does this keep happening? Why does it seem that nothing is changing? And ultimately, why does it seem like God is silent in the crux of evil and suffering? If God is supposed to be all-powerful and all-loving, why do evil and suffering exist? I'd like to try answering that question first with another question. Why do we humans care so much about justice? If we look at human history from chapter 1 of Genesis, we are told that God created us in Imago Dei, the image of God. It means that we, both male and female, were created in his likeness. And because we were created to be reflections of him, we are thus worthy of respect and dignity. Every human is therefore valuable to God, just how he made them. Now, God also gives us the dignity of free will. In the garden, Adam and Eve are given a choice. They can either rule alongside God under his wisdom and authority, or define good and evil for themselves and live by their own authority. We all know what ultimately happens, and it has led humanity down a path of evil, corruption, and self-destruction. The Old Testament is chock full of stories of how God tries to restore his people into a loving, personal relationship with him, but they continually choose to redefine morality for their own selfish motives. The reason God speaks out against injustice in the Bible is because when we take advantage of others, we violate the sanctity of the value, dignity, and respect that God gives to all of us. Ravi Zacharias, one of the greatest Christian scholars that recently just passed away, made this comment. God gives you the most sacred gift of the prerogative of choice, but God does not give you the privilege of determining a different outcome to what the choice will entail. The consequences are bound to the choice. The biblical narrative shows us that evil and suffering are the consequences of the inclinations and tendencies of our own hearts in trying to determine what is right and wrong for ourselves. Without a transcendent moral law by which to guide us, we are constantly in conflict with another person's definition of morality. If A tries to impose their own will on B, then B will naturally respond in kind, with the stronger of the two stepping on the other. This happens on all levels of society, from personally, familially, communally, and so on. But the story doesn't end there. While the people of the Old Testament continue to lead themselves down a path of evil and injustice, you read on and you find out that God still had a plan to save humanity from this endless cycle of hatred. No matter how many times they screwed up, his answer to the world who had shunned him for his apparent silence and inaction, was his own son, Jesus. He and his followers lived in the time of Roman oppression. While some had chosen to revolt, others decided to comply and adopt Roman culture and serve their king and gods. But Jesus responded differently, so differently that it cost him his life. The Bible Project, a nonprofit organization that creates YouTube videos about the Bible, describes Jesus living in this tension of loyalty and subversion. On one hand, he teaches in Matthew 5 verses 43 to 45, "You have heard that it was said, 'Love your neighbor and hate your enemy.' But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of the Father in heaven." And on the other hand, he also peacefully speaks out against the evil and corruption of the Roman Empire, like in Luke 11, 37 to 53, where he chastises the Pharisees and the experts on the law. Jesus surprisingly taught to love and even bless our enemies. But he was arrested as a criminal for critiquing Rome's idolatry of power. He wasn't a pacifist, but he never passed any fists. For this, he died a criminal's death. Now, if he had stayed dead, God's story of redemption and restoration of humanity would have died with him. But that's not what happened. God vindicated Jesus from the grave 3 days later, fulfilling the Old Testament prophecies, and made a way for us to live life just like he did. He loved God and he loved his neighbors as himself. And he commands us to do the same as his way of bringing healing and restorative justice to this broken world of ours. And he gives us the hope that one day he will come back for all those who follow him and bring us home to a new creation, where he will wipe away every tear, and his love, peace, joy, and justice will reign. Let me leave you with this. The story of God is a story of his pursuit for mankind. It is a narrative that has been woven with truth, depth, complexity on the human condition, but also of God's eternal love for his divine creations, us. He grieves and mourns for us, and he desires to redeem our broken world, our broken relationships, if we let him. He brings peace, healing, and restoration to all if we allow him to work in us and through us. So, to all listening, let us pray for George Floyd and his family. Let us pray for Ahmaud Arbery, Trayvon Martin, and all the others and their families. Let us pray that the shackles of racism and bigotry be thrown to the wayside. Let us listen to the hurting, empathize with the broken, and love the marginalized. But let us also pray for Derek Chauvin, for Tu Thao, and the rest of those ensnared in corrupt systems throughout the country. Let justice be served, but may God reach and redeem them as well in the midst of the consequences. Let us pray for those in law enforcement who do defend justice and righteousness, for continued wisdom and discernment. Let us pray and speak out for our people, for our nation, for our leadership, and point them in the right direction. And lastly, let us fight hate with love until the day he returns and brings us to a better place. God bless you guys.